Spinner Rack, that's our gospel. Spinner Rack,
Out.
Disney, Warner Brothers, Fox, if you want. My telephone number is. That's a good episode.
Yeah, it should.
So what about the funny one?
What?
You say you want to do something a little bit more comedy.
That hurt. That hurt. Oh, I'm out.
Gathered together from the cosmic reaches of the universe, here in this great hall of justice, are the most powerful forces of good ever assembled. Dedicated to truth, justice, and peace for all mankind.
Lord.
Welcome everybody, it's Spinner Rack, and it's me, Mars, here with my boy PD, and today we're talking about how to hook up the Star Wars universe and the Justice League universe. What can we do to make those two properties, which are prime time, work even better? You know, there've been some rocky roads with both of them. There've been people who don't agree, but you know what? We think these guys are diamonds in the rough. We think that we can reach there. So here, PD's gonna start it off, and we're gonna tell you what we think we can do. This is not a hit thing. This is just how do we make it better.
Well, I would start off to say that you like Solo, right?
I love Solo.
I like Solo also. I know some other people that like Solo. But the Star Wars, I guess Disney company, has put a halt on the future stories. Obviously not episode 9, but we're saying they had a whole bunch of movies and Boba Fett and Ben Kenobi and all the stuff coming down the pike. I mean, you're like, what do you do? Should they stop making these movies?
Hells no!
Exactly. I say you have to keep making these movies. The problem, we're going to start with the initial problem that Marvel's had. I don't have to have my producer allow me to curse on this one because it's a valuable word that needs to be learned.
Okay.
It's called ass betting.
Aspen, what the hell is that?
Okay, so when you say we're making, all right, you're playing cards, right?
Right.
Right now, or no, let's say we bet on a basketball game.
Okay.
Right? He bets on LeBron, I bet on the Golden State Warriors.
Who should lose?
I don't have any money, he has money in his pocket. I win, I just take in money. But if I were to lose that game 1 and I didn't have any money, I would have to say to him, I'm going to get you back later.
And I'll say, hells no, bro. Take your sneakers
And
off.
that's how Loan Shark and all this happens. So basically, Marvel, they did sort of ass bet, bet in the, because the idea is like you open up your pocket. This is the logic to it. You open up your wallet, there's no money. Look at that. That's ass betting, right? So Marvel put together a whole plan of movies, not knowing that they would sell, right? So they bet on themselves, bet that they could do some good movies, and they set the benchmark on how high it could go. Marvel is the ceiling. So Star Wars and even Warner Brothers, they looked at Marvel and said, that's our ceiling. And that's not your ceiling. You have to figure out what your ceiling is and go to it and play to it. But you've got a ton of movies on your schedule. We can't take those away because you already planned it out. We've got to figure out a new way to work this. Now we look at Rogue One. This was a successful movie. This was a solid movie, but what was wrong with it? And this wasn't about Creed, but what did they do wrong?
But remember, prior to that coming out and becoming successful, all these type of things where they have to do reshoots and do a whole bunch of work.
We had a rewrite with Christopher McQuarrie. It still was successful.
Yes, it was.
But what else did they do? What did they do wrong in this?
They killed off all their main characters.
Exactly. This is another trilogy right here. This is 3 movies in the bank. Look at the characters. They're from all this great stuff. The same what they tried to do with the prequels, but you know what? I can't even say try because the prequels were successful. So you have these guys and stop trying to be smart and saying we're going to play to the critics. This is 3 movies or more. So that's your first mistake of saying we're going to do a solid movie, this is going to be a quiet movie, this, that, and the other. This could be years in the future. And they could have tried to start with this and then do Force Awakens, and the bankroll would have been crazy. So then we have to go to The Last Jedi. Now, The Last Jedi had the bigger problem, which caused this sort of struggle that Solo went through. We had the critics decide that this was a great movie, and then the audience, they decided that it was not a great movie. So we can look at the audience score and see that there was a lot of remorse from The Last Jedi. And the other problem that they had is the same they had with Rogue One. They killed off Luke Skywalker, or maybe he comes back as Obi-Wan did.
As the Force Ghost?
But the whole thing is that we were not only expecting the new characters, we were expecting the old. And I don't know that they had to kill off Han or have Luke go on.
There may be a distinction between why Solo got a higher mark relative to why this got a lower mark, and that you have a larger universe of people seeing The Last Jedi, right? And so once they were burnt on that, fewer went to go see Solo.
Yes.
So the ones who did go see Solo are more hardcore, like myself, who are definitely interested in the story and ended up saying this was not a bad story, you know, and, which I think is going to live on. I think because of the way it was set up, I think it will do much better going forward than it turned out. But then again, people like the original trilogy, the prequel, and I can't understand that. So
well, the prequels, we can't take anything really away from it because they did so well. But this one can be more of an example of what you can do, and I would do the same technique for both Star Wars and for Warner Brothers. So with this one, we have to trim something. So if we trim something out, we know it's not going to work. We got to trim something out of this movie. We got to trim that scene with when they go light speed over to the casino. We got to trim this, and that takes out $25 million out of your budget, maybe, right?
Right.
So you're saving money, and then the money goes back to you. So then you have more of a success for the movie. So that's the first thing that you need to do, and I'm going to show you how you do this going forward to other movies. So you don't stop making movies; you just cut back on the movies you make. This is what canon does. This is what all movie makers do. They come in, Superman, they keep going down the line, they make a movie, and then next thing you know, the budget goes the budget goes down. So don't take all movies off your schedule, cut the budget. And all of these movies have an instinctional level to event. Take that out and have one big climax.
I think there's a much bigger problem than that. I think there's a problem in that there's an expectation by people who saw Star Wars that this was a much bigger story. Because what happens here is that you had the first director, he, with J.J. Abrams, he gave a certain amount of things to expect. You know, Snoke.
He did the same.
No, but he did like Snoke.
We can't fix. There's no way to fix bad movies.
Well, we're not saying fix.
All I'm saying is do your movie, find ways to cut the budget.
So you're looking. Well, you think cutting the budget?
I'm not even, because that's the thing. We could all comment on how they could fix the stories,
right?
But that's not going to save anything because I'm the director. They kick me out. You don't want my story to be with your name on it. Right. So you have to redo it. So we can't fix the way how volatile these movies are, where we lose Zack Snyder in one, we lose this guy in Solo. Like was Ryan Johnson? Was he always the guy? Or what's the name left? What's the J.J. Abrams?
J.J. Abrams is coming back,
and then now he's coming back. So it's sort of the audience will be back, and like we can't. Then he's going to throw out everything that
Ryan Johnson,
like Luke could show back up.
Exactly.
And people could be all happy. So that's the thing. I don't want to talk about story because that's too hard to figure. It just depends whoever they get in the seat. The studio believes that the director knows what they're doing. So all I can do here is cut the budget, then the money goes here. Then you go to Solo, find a way to cut the budget, and then at least 20 to 50 million taken out of the budget and move forward, because they keep trying to add too much. Right. So that's what you have to do in these new movies.
So by cutting the budget, you make the story a bit more, I guess you don't have this extraneous things going on.
Yes.
It's a smoother show. It shows you exactly they go from point A to point B, and there's no extraneous information or extraneous stuff, you know. And therefore also you save money to the bar for the show, the movie is no longer quite as high. So a typical movie needs to make at least twice what it brought in, 2 times, 3 times, whatever, what it cost. And if you can't make that bar, then you're considered a failure. You know, but Star Wars movies have a very high bar
they keep also looking at the Marvel. Don't look at the Marvel. We have to find our own ceiling for each Star Wars and Warner Brothers. And now we're going to use the some Warner Brothers movie to show this example again. Man of Steel was now if you look at what they have, we have the gross here, it costs 225 mil. That's not, for domestic, that's not a much, but when you look at worldwide, it makes its money back, right?
Right.
But what if we then cut the budget here? Now, we talked about, what scene would you first cut?
I would cut the the dragon scene, beginning scene.
There we go.
The
So
whole
we cut
Krypton.
we cut Krypton to just the planet exploding. Like we don't, because we're gonna flashback. This story's in flashbacks. We can get Jor-El back in there and the mother and maybe Zod, but we can cut that very much just to Zod being there and the planet exploding. And then we could, since it's in flashbacks, we could flash back a quick scene of Zod somewhere later. So that takes, in my mind, 10 million out, right? Then we go to the middle. If we go to the middle, there's this big Earth terraforming thing where we destroy the planet. To me, that's 50 million to, let's say 75 million, right?
Wow, that's a pretty big.
Now we cut that down. We got 85. We're down. We're in profits now. And we got the same bad movie. We just, on paper, cut out, and it's an old scene that was from Superman Lives, from the Kevin Smith thing, where they wanted a big spider, and they had a sort of spider. That's a leftover idea that you didn't need in the movie. I mean, the whole movie is explosions. You just do the Phantom Zone moment with the female Kryptonian. You don't do the terraforming with Zod. You get rid of those Kryptonians, and then you have the big fight at the end. And then you got your, what is it? At least I said 75, so we're 225. We're bringing that down to, it's going to be like, 140 million costs, and it's almost like 800. You're well into profits, and it's still the same bad movie. It doesn't matter. This is what you need to do, is look at this like that and reverse engineer what you're doing. So I'm coming to you with now 150, 175 Superman movie. Are you gonna, does that look better to you in the climate that you could make 600 million and you got, that's like, that's almost like 4 times what you made.
Right, but the Warner Brother president comes down to us and say, Petey, I want you to make this movie for 175 million, but I don't think they're going to do that because it doesn't seem that any of these superhero movies are ever made for under a certain amount of money, 150, 200 million, Do you think that they could actually do that? I think under Petey's scenario, this is actually something that could actually work, so long as the story holds up. They think that because because they spend a lot of money, these movies will work. But that's not necessarily the case. There has to be, either unless we're missing something in terms of how they calculate these movies, it's just not working out. The math doesn't hold up. Because then these properties where Man of Steel, people were talking about there being a Man of Steel 2 right away, there's nothing that happens. And this goes back to the Return of Superman, where that movie was successful, and I think Kyle has pointed that out several times.
It wasn't a huge blockbuster.
But it made money.
It made
that
money.
made money.
And that's what you have to keep in mind.
And they didn't continue that movie. And of course, in that area, like PD is saying, we could have cut certain things out. But that made money. And yet, Man of Steel was a much more dicier affair, a different look for Superman, whereas Return of Superman was a classic Superman that we expected.
Yeah, it had some things. It had some visual. And the thing is, you can't even worry about, okay, so there isn't that much fighting in Superman Returns, and there's fighting in Man of Steel. The fact that they're basically, what they made in the theaters is comparable means that we had to figure something out. And you had to sit back, and you can't say, that's the thing. They're struggling with Marvel making these movies, and we had to put out the Justice League, and it's not making the Marvel numbers. But, Justice League is a solid movie, but it goes back to something you were saying about using up people's goodwill, right?
Yes.
That aspect. So,
but I think people lost their goodwill, and I think this is the same thing with Star Wars. Is that everybody was expecting a great movie when what was the first movie called? Not Last Jedi.
Force Awakens.
Force Awakens, and so that was gangbusters. But there was so much pent up expectation, it became a huge hit. It was an event movie. It didn't matter how it went, and that's the same thing that happened with Batman versus Superman. It was an event movie because if you remember the numbers were extremely high when it began, and it tanked right away. But it made so much money so fast that people were like, "Wow, this is going to be our new bar." And this is where they were tricked. and this is what PD's saying. No, that's not a real bar. That was, if that movie's an event movie, you probably cannot reach that same title again. I mean, the same thing that happened with Black Panther, which since that was an event movie,
Yes.
or Wonder Woman, those were event movies, you may not be able to hit that same bar. But if you can come close to it, you're still a success. And as long as you keep the cost down, you're going to be a success. And that's what we're talking about.
And you're also struggling with the buyer's remorse, because in looking at Force Awakens, there could be some buyer's remorse from that, because there's aspects of how he shot that worked, and then there's going back to just trying to hit all the right, sort of being cookie cutter. And that's the thing that the moviegoers start to get back when they start to say, you know what, this Black Panther might not be what we think it is. They have to be mindful that they can't go into Black Panther immediately thinking it's going to... I mean, they can go into Avengers, the Infinity, whatever the new title is for the fourth movie, and expect to have those numbers. But everyone else, you can't bank on Marvel numbers anymore. And you have to make some changes just going out to get your new footing.